episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today, again, we have Zishan coming back on as our guest host. Zishan, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And in case you have some weird noises, again, I have a new studio, so I'm kind of getting all the kinks out of my audio. I didn't get a chance to finish it up. But in any case, we have a very special guest on, Ivan Cernja, who is a developer relations over at Shuttle. Welcome. Ivan, how are you?
Hey, everyone. Doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I think the last time we recorded with Zishan, we had, I was going to say colleague, but not really colleague, right? He's more of a, I don't know what you call that.
Yeah, he's a friend.
He's a friend. He's fellow Rustacean.
Fellow Rustacean, yeah. He's someone that we really enjoy working together with in collabs that we do, especially on the educational side of things.
So you don't call each other like astronauts or some other kind of word like that? To, like Googlers have, the Googler thing, Rustacean, no word for shuttler?
So shuttlers is one of those words, which coincidentally is also our website, which is shuttle.rs, so shuttlers and shuttle.rs.
Oh.
So since we are in alpha right now, we do have people who are now using Shuttle are our test. You can also call them astronauts. So we do keep up with the lingo.
Okay, yeah. How long have you actually been working at Shuttle? I mean, did you start at the beginning or kind of came in later on?
No, I came in later on, perhaps a couple of months after Shuttle went from closed alpha into open alpha. But I've been with Shuttle for almost a year now.
Now, what got you interested in Shuttle in the first place?
Oh, that's a very good one. Maybe if I take it a little bit back in terms of how I got to Shuttle, it would make a lot of things more clearer. So I have a background, and I started off about 7 or 8 years ago with front-end development. And, that was an out-of-school experience to turn some money on the side and to create websites for local businesses in my region. And a first step into IT overall. Then I transitioned into project management, worked with various agencies for some big worldwide clients. And then I went into project management consultancy, working as a freelancer. In all those years, I also did development on the side. So either JavaScript front-end development and or Flutter development for some of the clients. Then I was at a stage where, let's say tired of project management. And I was also tired of JavaScript and Dart. And those two events got me to look into Rust. And I started learning Rust pretty much at that point. And while I was learning, I stumbled upon Shuttle, tried to use it to deploy some of the things I've built. And that led me to do some contributions to Shuttle back in the early days. And that's when I thought it would be cool to change both the language and the role and the career to something better, to a better language and to a better position. So that's when I reached out to the Shuttle team in a very, let's say, glamorous way by preparing a pitch deck that had 12 slides explaining to them why me and what kind of wonders I can make happen. That's pretty much the lead up to how I joined Shuttle. The longer story is filled with, a lot of cool and interesting things, and how this whole conversation worked out when someone who randomly joined your community and did a couple of contributions sent you a pitch deck where they're pitching themselves to become a member of the company. It's quite a fun story to tell.
Now, when you started off at Shuttle, I mean, right now you're DevRel, right? But I'm guessing you probably weren't DevRel before when you first started off, right?
I was a DevRel when I started off, but the scope of DevRel activities is quite widespread and difficult to nail down what exactly a DevRel. So at the very beginning, it was more activities related to, let's say content production, community management, promotion efforts, etc., etc. So, I had enough with the knowledge I had accumulated up until that point, whether that's, knowledge from previous programming endeavors and the stuff I learned regarding Rust on the lead up to joining Shuttle.
Cool. I think we should talk a bit about what Shuttle is. If you can introduce us to it. And I know a bit about it. I used it, as I said before. But for our audience, it would be nice to know what it's all about.
Sure. So Shuttle's tagline is very simple, and it is build backends fast. Pretty much a cloud development platform that utilizes the infrastructure from code concept to help developers build and deploy Rust applications. Infrastructure from code is not the same as infrastructure as code. The difference here is that you annotate your code in your main file. You add a macro or two, depending on which resource you want to provision. And then at compile time, you get the insurance that you're getting the infrastructure that you need, whether that's a database, whether that's a secret store, whatever we support at this. And the benefit of that is that developers can then rapidly prototype their applications. They can easily scale them. And I think the biggest point is that at compile time, you know that your infra will be there. And there's no YAML files, there's no navigating complex consoles and then figuring things out. So really, I would even say anyone can get started immediately, whereas other approaches might take some time to get used to things like, I don't know, infrastructure as code or navigating around the AWS console and so on. So they can focus pretty much just on writing and deploying the Rust applications with ease.
Thanks so much. And why Rust? Why is this focus on Rust?
The simple answer is because we love Rust.
Okay.
But other than that, we believe that Rust is a great fit for backend web development, and we are expecting it to grow in popularity. At the very beginning of Shuttle, I wasn't a part of Shuttle then, but this whole macro thing that Rust offers was a great opportunity to test out and try out the infrastructure from code concept by utilizing code gen to do certain things in order to, provision resources for you in a simple and easy way.
When you say code gen, are you talking about macros?
Yeah, macros.
Okay, cool. Is it like going to remain like there are two sides of it, right? One is implementation, the backend, and that a lot of people are doing that in Rust, and as you said, it's getting popularity in backend. But from with respect to your users, at the moment, at least, it's very Rust specific as well, right? And
yes.
Using Shuttle. Is it something that you plan to keep it that way, or is there going to be other languages supported, or what's the plan in that regard, if you can share?
Sure. So we are definitely planning to keep it as it is in terms of supporting the building and deploying of Rust apps. Maybe one thing that might steer away, I can mention here Shuttle Next, which is a framework that we are building on the side. It's very, very, very early stages now, but it's based on Axum, and its plan is to become a batteries included framework for backend development in Rust, and it will utilize WASM because of the isolation it offers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Is it like WASM as in like the pure WASM, or is it like going to utilize some WASI or something like that? If you know.
It's going to, because it has no notion of a file system, we're going to use it so that the project can only interact with the host through resources explicitly declared by. But, as we move on, as we gather feedback, it's very early stages for Shuttle again, since we're in alpha. But, we are carefully keeping an eye on feedback that we get from users. And depending on how the interest changes, especially in Rust with ever-evolving ecosystem, we will let that steer a certain portion.
Cool.
So we have another framework. I feel like we're almost catching up to JavaScript to a certain extent. It's like every couple months, I think we have a new web framework, it seems.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. But I feel like it's a bit different in the Rust case because we are really trying to nail down the best, developer experience. And at the very beginnings of Rust web development, you gotta iterate a lot, iterate quick, and try to come up with the best solutions and like the best way. Maybe developers from other languages could more easily transition into Rust. So there's a lot of, experimenting and seeing what sticks.
It seems like I think the biggest winner in all this is Arthur and whoever made Hyper. It seems no matter what, Hyper is always going to be the one library. So he's making out like a bandit in this case.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about is all your implementation open source? Because I've seen at least much of it saw it on GitHub and everything. So is it like all open source or just some? Or?
Everything is open source. From the very product to everything that's happening in the background, to the website and to our docs, everything is fully open source. And
awesome.
We are planning to keep it that way.
Wow. May I ask, was there any discussion about that? Or is it just like you guys are all open source people and you just decide that we want to do it open source, no matter what?
We love open source. And during my stay, quote unquote, in Shuttle, I was blown away by, among other things, by all the contributors that we have and our community and everyone who's helping, build Shuttle from the ground up. We couldn't have done a lot of things without those special
Cool.
contributors.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
It's very impressive, actually, how you have done it. People often they create a startup around an idea. Oh, it's a cool idea, and then they're very reluctant to put anything in open source much at all. But you folks went all in, so it's quite impressive that not only you did that, but you made it a success.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of people on your Discord server,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen a lot of people there that are mostly saying good things.
Thank you.
And I'm one of them, by the way. So far, I ran into some issues actually, but when I came to the Discord, I was helped very promptly by folks. So it's a pretty good community from what I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for us, especially when you consider the current state of thoughts of the wider developer community when it comes to Rust web development and getting started with Rust. I would even call them slight misconceptions in terms of the difficulty of learning Rust. And I say that because I think that if you compare the period 2 years ago to today, a lot has changed when it comes to making Rust accessible to people in the whole Rust education system, quote unquote. And we really put an emphasis on ensuring that anyone who comes over has a good getting started experience, that we unblock them as soon as possible. We don't want to attribute or contribute to the thoughts of the developer community, which revolve around Rust is hard to get into. It's difficult to do X, it's difficult to do Y. And we really want to, advocate and showcase to everyone that it's getting much better. And a lot of us, not just Shuttle, like everyone in the ecosystem, is doing a lot to make things simpler.
Right. I actually noticed one of the strengths of Shuttle, or at least that's the focus, to make it super easy to get started. And Rust is not a language that people usually associate with getting started quickly.
Yeah.
But you folks are really doing a lot in that regard. And one of the things I noticed announced recently on Discord was this Shuttle AI, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And where you have a prompt. I'll let you explain it, what it is. And
sure.
What's the thought behind it?
So Shuttle AI, I would call it an experiment. It's an experiment that we decided to do with all of the trends happening now in the world with AI, with LMs, with OpenAI, etc., etc. And we wanted to see whether there was something we could do with the goal of, quote unquote, supercharging developers' productivity. So is there any way we could do something that with a small amount of effort could result in a lot of time saved for developers? And that's how we came up with Shuttle AI. For those who have not seen it or heard about it, it's pretty much a CLI tool where you can run Shuttle AI build, and then inside the quotes, you write a prompt on what you want to build or what you want the AI to build. The demo that we are showcasing on our website is build me a website that checks whether shuttle.rs is up. And what happens then? So when you press enter, we pass that in, and then I'm not going to go into too many details now, but it generates a project definition that can be later fed back into the LLM, which then turns into Rust code using the Actix framework. Now, at that point, you already have something working with Actix, but we want to make it work with Shuttle. So then the Actix generated code gets then fed into a process called shuttleification, which is when the AI looks into our Actix examples, and we have a lot of them in our repo. Again, back to the making getting started easy part. And it looks at it and it figures out how to shuttleify that code, where to put the macro, how to change the return type of the main function. And then it also shuttleifies the cargo.toml file by adding shuttle dependencies, which need to be there to make things happen. Then, once we have the code ready, once the AI has the code ready, it starts building and compiling the app. Now, this is the most problematic part when it comes to using, for example, GPT to help you with development, because you give it a prompt, it gives you some code, you put it into your editor, and it's not working because something is wrong. And this is where we have our feedback compiler loop, where if there's an error at compile time, we feed that error back to the AI and then iterates on it until it fixes the issue. And once the issue has been fixed, it proceeds to build a project and to deploy it to Shuttle. And then after 6.5 minutes, you have a URL at which your project is living on. And then in the demo at the end, we curl that URL and we get a response saying Shuttle RS is up.
That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned about like sometimes there's a compiler and then you feed it back to the AI and after a few loops, it figures it out. I'm wondering how it works because each time I have had this kind of problem with ChatGPT, I asked it a lot of questions about how do you solve this and that. And a lot of times it ends up in a compiler. But there have been so many times, I think majority of the cases where it just ends up just repeating itself in a loop. So it goes in an infinite loop of just like going back and forth between different options that it provided me, and it just can't escape it, no matter how much input I provide. So I'm wondering how it is working for you that it escapes that loop so easily. I think I use this 3.5, right? The GPT 3.5, and 4 is apparently a lot better. So are you using that?
We are using 4 for Shuttle AI. And to answer your question, I think that the feedback compile loop is working the way it's working is because it has a lot of examples to work from. And just to mention, all of those examples are Shuttle examples that we also use in our docs in order to demonstrate to users how to work with ActX, for example.
Now, I know that the way ChatGPT works is like it has a very old data set. My original question was like, how well up to date could it actually be, number one? But I think that we already know it's kind of somewhat of an old data set. Now, we cannot use, like, I'm just trying to think of like, what kinds of frameworks would it be able to use? You cannot use your new framework that you're working on right now, right? I think one, probably because it's still in progress, two, the data set doesn't include that, right?
Yeah. Look, the GPT cutoff is what, in 2021? So if it would rely on that cutoff, it wouldn't work, obviously. But that's why we feed it our docs and our examples. And our docs contain which version dependencies you need to have for Shuttle, the current state of ActX, and it takes that knowledge, that information, in order to shape it. Because if we didn't feed it with our examples and with our docs, what we would end up with is pretty much the same issue that you are describing.
Yeah, there's API to fine-tune all those models that they have, OpenAI models. So yeah, you can always tailor it. So I think I had some few more questions written down. One of them was about this thing called Shuttle Heroes.
Yeah.
From what I understood, it's about something about interns or internships or something like that.
The Shuttle Heroes program is something that we are very proud of. Since we're open source, since contributions are more than welcome, and since we have a large community on Discord, which, is over 2,000 members. I mean, large for our standards. It is, at one point, we noticed that it was important to notice those who go above and beyond with Shuttle. Those users who spend their own free time to do certain contributions, whether that's, contributing to our code, fixing bugs, creating, content around Shuttle, educational blog posts, contributing to our docs, helping out others in our Discord server who get stuck or on GitHub issues. And at one point we decided it only makes sense to reward those people, as I said, above and beyond. And that's how the whole Shuttle Heroes program was created. And in short, what it is it's a way of saying thank you and rewarding those who do those activities. Some of the perks that you get when you become a hero is you get swag sent your way, so you have new clothes. You get early access to some features that we are working on. For example, one of them quite recently is Shuttle AI, where our heroes' feedback was very appreciated because we rolled it out to them a week earlier and wanted to get some first impressions. We host a lot of events, and if you're a hero, even if it's limited the amount of participants, your spot is reserved there. And one of the perks that a lot of users like is the consideration for our paid open source program. And that way we can even turn that above and beyondness where someone spends their free time into something where they actually get, money for it.
Right. You mentioned something about like early access. So when you work on new features and things, is it like first you do it in-house behind closed door and then you release it slowly, or because you said like everything is open source, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's open source from the day one always during development, or there's a buffer in between.
So the way one part of how we build Shuttle is we gather a lot of feedback. And based on that feedback from our users, we create certain initiatives on how to solve certain problems. Now, at that stage, everything is internal in terms of creating the initiative, speccing it out, and figuring out, what steps need to be taken. And that's the stage where very early feature development stage where not a single line of code is written. We share it with our heroes to get some thoughts from them and ideas and suggestions, etc. And then once we have that sorted out, then we start working on it by, starting with adding changes to the code base, etc.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we should get back to Rust because it's a Rust podcast. Yeah, well, I was wondering, like, if you have any like specific issues you had with Rust, like some pain points when you have been working with, Rust.
As I said in the beginning, enabling users a better getting started experience. What I noticed in the Rust ecosystem and in the Rust web ecosystem is that a lot of libraries or crates have, for example, just standard docs.rs docs, which don't have a lot of examples, don't have a lot of explanations on why certain things are a certain way. And I know a lot of experienced Rust developers love docs.rs because they can get all the info where they need it. But when you're a beginner, it's quite overwhelming to be hit with default docs.rs documentation generation. And there's even videos and blog posts on how to read docs.rs. And I think that's something that can be avoided by putting more effort into building on top of those docs, into better documenting the code, giving out examples, or even drawing a conclusion between something that's maybe similar in other languages, but at first glance it is not. So that users coming from different backgrounds can also see, okay, this is what it is, without spending a substantial amount of time to figure things out. I would say that part was very difficult to comprehend at the very beginning when starting with Rust.
Cool. I was actually hoping for you to say something about one of my favorites that I think talk about in every episode here that I've been on, is like the async runtime issues, right? Like the async await. From what I remember, that the code, the template that's generated for Shuttle, it is async by default, right?
Yes.
And it assumes async. So I'm wondering if you had any trouble with that, or you just, like most projects, assume Tokyo and everything is solved.
Yeah, so the way I started with learning was through the Zero to Prod book by Luca Palmieri. So everything was, let's say, straightforward and throughout my learning. But later on, I realized the amount of issues with that whole topic. So it took some time until I hit it. But overall, yeah, the thing I can say is that it's a known thing. And I think that everyone is in one way or the other trying to make the whole async thing, better.
Right. And do you you folks use Tokyo, right? Behind the scene. Okay. So well, that helps a lot, if you can assume that. Alan, you have some questions?
No, I mean, I guess the only kind of question I have is, it seems like you guys are dabbling in so many things. You're working on this framework, you have the whole platform, you have the AI one, which I thought was a little bit shocking, but actually, when I think about it, it seems everybody's doing some of the AI nowadays, so not so shocking as. But I guess my questions in my mind at the moment is really kind of like, what's next? I mean, is there somewhere that you guys really think you want to go to next, or were you allowed to even talk about this, or what's going on?
I can talk about it on a high level, and I can say that we're in alpha right now. We're very close to getting out of alpha. And our current main priority is to get Shuttle into beta. And what beta means for us is increased stability and reliability, a better overall getting started experience, and making a step forward towards being able to become, a reliable host for production level apps. That's on a high level what our main priority is. Now, the other things that you mentioned, Shuttle Next, the WASM framework that we're working on, and Shuttle AI, we are dipping our toes in those things. And we are not putting, how do I put this? We're not putting a lot of effort in terms of, pushing it before we have clear evidence that that is something that users would like to see, something they are interested in, and something that would solve their problems. To give you an example, for Shuttle AI, we dipped our toes there. We released it. We received a lot of subscribers to the waitlist, and we received a lot of feedback. Now that we have all of that feedback, we can slowly start analyzing it and seeing, what makes sense, what doesn't, is it worth going forward? If yes, in which direction? What's the next, thing we can take off the list and give it to users and then iterate on it? That's the approach that we are taking. And going into beta, among other things, is also, taking all the feedback that we accumulated over alpha, the way the Rust ecosystem evolved, everything that changed, and just, applying that and exiting alpha.
I already asked you about what was the downside of Rust, what was the pain points. What was the opposite? What is the best thing about using Rust in Shuttle?
Oh, that's a good question. Coming from JavaScript, it was the fact that, at compile time, you knew where you're at. There's not a lot of surprises coming at later stages. And, the errors that you get coming from Rust are, in my opinion, much better. And the whole, how do I put it? You really need to try hard to write bad code with Rust is also one of the benefits or non-pain points, or however you want to put it. I think that's the number one thing, because when you do things with JavaScript, for example, it takes some time to get used to what certain errors mean, what you messed up, where you have messed it up. And I think that Rust just eliminates a big percentage of those things.
Cool. Yeah, I ask because it's interesting that you as a startup chose Rust. A lot of startups are doing that now, but many are reluctant. At least the CEO or CTO, I've seen that one of them is always a bit skeptical about using it because they need to move fast. Yep. And they think that this will be a bit of a roadblock, which if you don't know Rust already, I'm sure there is it's a roadblock.
Yeah, but I think it's a good bet, or at least time has revealed that, because, we see from day to day more and more, for example, companies moving certain segments over to Rust, and we see, case studies being presented, etc., etc. And, the more we see this, and it's coming more often and more often, the better we feel about it, and it's so exciting to look at it and to talk to those people, and in the end even work with them to shape things around to make their lives easier.
Cool.
It just reminded me, I think Kerry Nichols said that if you want to move fast in terms of prototyping, Rust is definitely not the right one. But obviously, if you can't go fast, at least you can have something that basically will run for the most part, if you do things properly. If you're just doing .unwrap everywhere, you're going to have problems, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. I don't think I have any other questions. I mean, Zishan, you have anything?
Yeah, I did want to ask about persistence, if I may. You have this API, right, for persistence, that you can add persistence to any data type, like a struct or I guess enum as well. And I found it really, helpful when I started the app because, as I said, I'm not from the web backend. I don't know much about it. So when I was writing it, it really helped me create super quickly, add persistence to my data type. But immediately I realized that it's actually, I need something beyond that because it doesn't give me a way to query. Like if you have a large data set, I can't just query something and then get it back like I would do with a database, right? Which you also have support for. I was just wondering if you have some plans in that regard, like making it bigger, provide more API there.
So first of all, noted. Thank you for the good feedback. For now, there hasn't been that much interest shown, but we tend to do polls. We tend to do a lot of interviews with users. And now that you've mentioned this, we have it on a list. We'll have it in 2 minutes when I write it down. But we very often, when someone requests something that seems as something that others might be interested in or might want to have implemented, we try to talk about it quite frequently in public in our Discord server and see whether there's someone else who's also interested into it. And then we use the amount of feedback, to change up the priorities in terms of what we are building next. A good example maybe worth mentioning here is that we thought about maybe doing an integration where Shuttle would allow you to provision like vector databases, for example. And we got some cool insights there from our users. We used that, to adjust the priorities and seeing what makes sense to build next.
Cool. Looking forward to those.
What is a vector database? I've never heard of a vector database before. You mean like a graph?
So it's currently quite often used when it comes to the whole AI trend. But in terms of the definition, it's a way to store information through the use of vectors. So high dimensional vectors.
Okay. I never heard of that before. There's too many databases. I just like Postgres and then that's it. And if I need to add GPS, and I add PostGIS and I'm done. Too many different databases out there to keep track of.
I mean, the most common use case is for AI models to access them quickly. They store data such as text, video, images, etc., that are then converted into vector embeddings.
I'm guessing that's because you say you've seen vectors, so that'd be like the way to map everything. That sounds more like a graph to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Could be the same, or maybe there's difference. I don't know, but okay. I'll try to take a look. You give me homework tonight, I wanted to relax, and now I have homework.
Hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's homework. That's what it is.
We are only going to move quicker from this point. So today's homework will be probably less than homework the next month.
I actually didn't want to admit it, but I didn't know either. I've heard this word before, of course. I have heard the term vector database, and I checked it out before, but I forgot. But I didn't want to admit it that I'm the only one.
Yeah, I guess the other thing too is there's some connection with Linz. You guys are moving, or you're moving to Linz. Is that right?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, pretty much, Stefan and Shuttle collaborated for the first time last year in December when we hosted the Rust for JavaScript developers workshop. And back then, I met Stefan and, we talked a bit. He told me how cool Linz was. And at the same time, I was living in Zagreb with my girlfriend, and we decided that we want to move out from Zagreb. She's a dentist, and I can work from anywhere. So I told her, let's go either to Austria, Germany, Slovenia, or maybe Istria, if you like some of those locations. And in the end, she got a job offer in Linz, which is quite interesting. And I was proud of the fact that, Linz, according to Stefan, a very cool city. And then anytime I mentioned in conversations with other Austrians and Germans, they were like, Linz? Why Linz? How come Linz? Because, it tends to be like the most popular cities in Austria to move to are usually, Vienna, maybe Salzburg, maybe Graz. Linz is not usually a common choice, presumably because it's, especially if you're in IT, Linz is also called the city of steel because it has, steel factories and stuff. But yeah, it's quite an interesting development.
I think if you also move, there will be a pretty healthy Rust community there then.
Yes.
Because there's already Rust Linz, right? So
yes,
that already tells us there is a community there and further strengthen it.
Yeah,
so,
and a much bigger one than in Croatia, definitely.
My mind was actually stuck on the dentist, your girlfriend being a dentist in Linz. And now I'm thinking that the people in Linz maybe have not the best dental care. And they need more dentists. I don't know. That was my mind kept stuck the whole time. She was able to find a job so quickly.
Yeah. Well, there was an alternative that we were planning. Since I can work remotely and she can't, we thought about opening up a dentist truck. It plays the music and it comes to your house. You go out, you go into the truck, they fix up your teeth, and then you move on with your day. You get some candy and stuff. But yeah, that would be a good way to combine traveling, being a nomad.
I think you will find a lot of patients, but maybe more than you can handle. But it would be a bit hard sell for the insurance company.
Yeah, definitely. We can always expand, have 20 trucks going through Europe and fixing teeth.
I think you missed the main point of his plan is that he's going to hand out candy also. So that way he gets return visits,
Exactly.
You have to generate, this is MRR, right? Monthly returning revenue.
Yeah, we even might have some Croatian around the street who waits for the patients and then, breaks out some teeth.
I would think you want to go to a place like rugby or hockey heavy area. They use a lot of teeth in those places.
Great idea. Great idea. But yeah, I mean, I'm not crazy. You guys can see there's a lot of opportunities here to monetize on.
For Rust or for the teeth?
Well, for both. I'm investing into Rust. She's investing into, broken teeth. It's a bright future ahead of us.
That's good to hear that.
Sorry, Zishan, you asked something at the very beginning of this dentist truck conversation regarding Linz.
No, I was just saying that there will be a community. That was just a comment.
Yeah.
So there is already a community, and if you go there as well, then it will be even strengthened.
Yeah.
So at least someone asked like, why Linz? So you say, well, Rust is the reason. So.
Yeah, I can write a blog post. I love Rust so much that I decided to move to Linz because of it.
Right. And if you ever get bored, you can always move to Berlin.
Of course.
Cool town, and there's a lot of Rust people here.
Of course.
Just make sure one more time, Zishan, is there any other question you have? Otherwise, I think it's a good time for us to wrap up.
No, I think we can ask what he would like to share with us at the end. Any feedback, any advice for Rustaceans out there who are listening?
Definitely. Maybe I can start off with sharing. I mean, your listeners already know about the Launchpad, which we are doing in collaboration with Stefan. And I just want to emphasize that we're really, trying to do our best to make Rust education as accessible as possible. So, make sure to follow along with the updates. And in terms of overall, the future is bright. There might be, or there is going to be a moment when I'm now imagining, but there's going to be a moment where all of a sudden it will make all sense to do more things in Rust with the developments in technology, with the developments overall. And I think that, especially if you're just starting to learn Rust, stick with it. It's worth it. You will lose less nerves or hair or whatever than with other languages. And, from the get-go, you will be sure that being forced to write clean code is going to do you wonders as you move on.
That's great advice. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. And with that, thank you for coming on and talking about Shuttle. And again, Zishan, thank you for finding Ivan and also for taking time to come onto the show too to help out. And yeah, I guess we always kind of forget, if people want to get in contact with you, how can they best do that?
I'm most reachable on Discord, where I spend most of the day. So if they want to contact me personally, on Twitter, my handle is CERNJAI. Or they can reach out to the Shuttle profile on Twitter, or they can reach out on Discord, both in the channel, in the server, or privately. Anyway, if there's any way of you talking to Shuttle or anything related to Shuttle, chances are you will find me there, or you will have the opportunity to message me. But I encourage everyone, if you have any questions, any thoughts, anything, reach out. Perhaps the easiest way is via our Discord server, which you can join via discord.gg/shuttle. And, we'll do our best to ensure that you have a pleasant stay and that you get all the info that you need.
Awesome. And with that, again, thank you guys for coming on, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome. This is, by the way, my first podcast.
That's what they always say.